Welcome. This is video 15 of the Assessing Risk of Significant Harm training course for child protection practitioners. This course looks specifically at the use of Stage 2 risk assessment or Risk 2 format to assess risk of significant harm. Video 15 provides an explanation of how to complete Section 7 of Stage 2 risk assessment. Is this harm significant? Section 7 is one of the more difficult sections to complete in Risk 2. This is your judgment about whether the identified harm is significant. In the previous sections of Risk 2, you have explored and established whether there is harm or if harm is predicted in the future. In Section 7, we focus on what makes that harm significant. It is a large, unstructured section to record your rationale. It does not have boxes to tick or questions to help you organize your analysis. Throughout this course, we have emphasized that the question of the significance of harm is an important judgment in child protection. We have clarified how this is presented in law and its interpretation in case law. As a professional judgment, it is made on the balance of probability rather than being a scientific or definitive answer, which is either right or wrong. At the beginning of Section 7 in Risk 2, there is a small guidance section to remind you of the key issues related to significant harm. However, remember there is also a guidance document for the Stage 2 risk assessment which provides additional guidance and explanation. This small introductory section reminds us of the two aspects of significance which we have introduced during this course. These are meaning or attribution and substantiality. It reads, harm may become significant when there is additional meaning or inference to the harm. For example, a child with a broken arm will have suffered harm. This may be significant if there are concerns that it was inflicted by a carer on purpose, or through neglecting to keep the child safe in a hazardous environment, or not seeking timely treatment. Significant harm is often incident-based, but longer-term neglect may also constitute significant harm. It goes on to clarify that this is a judgment. It is not a yes or no where there is a clear, correct answer to it. It says, reaching a professional decision about whether the unmet needs constitute harm and whether the harm is significant is a complex judgment. As part of this risk assessment, please record the factors that may indicate that this harm is significant. If we remind ourselves of the two key features of significance, first, the harm is severe or serious, or is likely to be so in the future. Secondly, that it has additional meaning. And we often use the story of a 6-year-old on a dark winter's night falling off their bike and breaking their arm. Harm is absolute. There is a fracture. Broken bones are serious injuries. They cause severe pain and require immediate medical attention. So a child who has an accident and breaks their arm is injured. They are seriously harmed. If we explore meaning or attribution, let's contrast these two versions of the story. Firstly, the child is in the presence of an adult. They were there during the accident and took the child immediately to A&E. The child had immediate medical attention and was comforted by the parent. Despite the injury and the seriousness of the harm caused to the child, there would be no additional meaning. However, in contrast, let's imagine that the parents were not present the child was unsupervised. Both parents were incapacitated through drugs. They didn't know where the child was on a dark winter's night on a housing estate. When the child was hurt, they couldn't respond. When a passerby picked up the child and brought him home, the door wasn't answered. The parents couldn't be roused. Police had to be called. The child was taken to A&E in an ambulance. In this example, the injury is the same, but there is additional meaning to the second scenario, which would probably make the harm significant. Other examples of harm that is likely to become severe over time would be a child hearing domestic abuse, becoming fearful and uncertain over time. In those examples, there is, of course, additional meaning, as the harm is caused directly by the behaviour of the parents who fail to put the child's interest first or protect them from the negative effects of their behaviour. Another example related to additional meaning could refer to the attitude of parents, their ability to change, including disguised compliance. A parent who indicates external motivation to change when they say, "I'll do anything you tell me to do so I can get my children back home," or "We don't have a problem, all of you have a problem with us, and you just keep interfering." This provides additional meaning to the harm or likelihood of harm. Or a parent who has said that they won't let their violent partner back into the property, but do so time and time again, relapsing into dangerous behaviour repeatedly, at the cusp of being between pre-contemplation and contemplation in the stages of change. In this case, likelihood of serious harm and the meaning relates to the failure of the parents to change. Or in disguised compliance, telling practitioners that they aren't in contact with their ex-partner, telling workers about how much better and safer they feel, and that the children seem more settled, knowing that's what the practitioners need to hear, whilst still in a covert relationship with their ex-partner. If you feel a little stuck, don't worry. Sometimes there are particularly cases that even experienced child protection practitioners find difficult. After RIS2 was created, the Significant Harm Checklist was developed to give additional guidance and structure to the question of significance. It was developed to help with difficult cases or uncertainty. We have seen some practitioners use it with all their cases and others only when they feel they need additional support with their risk assessment. In the Significant Harm Checklist, there are two main areas. These will be familiar to you, namely seriousness or severity of harm, and secondly, additional meaning or attribution. If we look first at the section which explores the seriousness or severity of harm. In your workbook, you'll see an example of the first section of the Significant Harm Checklist. It allows you to identify aspects that may make the harm severe. You'll see indicators such as high degree of harm, premeditation, and coercion. For example, this could help you identify and structure your information in a sentence or two, such as this. I consider that the harm is substantial because of the intentional tormenting of her by her stepfather about her weight and sexuality over a long period of time. This was done in a premeditated way, using social media with implied threats to embarrass her socially. Emotional impact on her over the last 4 years has been traumatic, and she has become socially isolated, constantly anxious about what people are thinking about her. You can see how the use of the checklist brought the worker's attention to some of these areas highlighted in the example shown. The second area relates to additional meaning, implications, attribution, or inference. In your workbook, you will see an example of the second section of the significant harm checklist. It allows you to identify aspects that may indicate additional meaning. It looks at these across three areas. These are the capacity of the parents to do what would be reasonable to expect of a parent. If the child is beyond parental control, and other external factors beyond those within parental control, and these could include grooming and exploitation. The format in the significant harm checklist provides a structure to identify these areas. For example, if you completed section 2.1, it explores parental capacity and what is judged reasonable for a parent. In this example of a statement related to additional meaning, you will identify how section 2.1 has helped structure this example. Some of the components from section 2.1, questions A, C, and D, are highlighted. I consider that there is additional meaning that indicates that this harm may be significant for the child. This relates to the capacity of the parent. A reasonable parent would have ensured that the injury, if caused by a third party or by accident, was discussed with a doctor and medical advice or treatment sought. Both parents are predominantly concerned about meeting their own needs as drug users. They are unable to attend to the needs of either of their children. At times, they seem unable to confirm who comes into the home or whether they present a risk to the children. These are concerns that I predict that if the same circumstances happen in the future, the same things would occur. The case example developed through this course will have become familiar to you. A single parent who, under the influence of heroin, was unavailable to meet the child's needs or protect them from harm. There were other drug users visiting, and exposed needles were left around where the child could have access. Harm was likely to increase as the child became more mobile. The parent had tried to change several times, but was not successful in sustaining change. These relapses into behaviour patterns where a critical need was unmet, the child being at risk from other people in the house and from used needles. There had been relapses twice in the last 3 months. She was not engaging with a substance misuse service, and even though a needle disposal unit had been left at the house to reduce these risks, it had not been routinely used. In this example of a Section 7 statement, it has a lot of evidence in relation to the factors that may make harm significant. It starts by identifying unmet needs and harm and explores parental capacity. It clarifies the critical need in the statement. Critical needs read child safety from unknown callers, exposed needles. You'll notice it references the use of some methodologies to support analysis, such as the continuum of motivation and the 7 steps of contemplation. It identifies the concern about disguised compliance, that motivation is external and has little ownership of the problem or solution, indicating she's at pre-contemplation. You can pause the video to read the statement. It continues. You'll notice that prior to case conference there was poor compliance, but improved under the monitoring of a child protection plan. But we hear about police intelligence about drug users going into the house, and unannounced visits provide very different evidence than when they are announced. The evidence about the poor use of the needle disposal units is evidence from the unannounced visits. You can pause your video to read the statement. There is a copy of the example in your workbook. The statement written as part of this case example is about likelihood of a child being harmed. If you remember the case law related to likelihood, it indicated that the more serious the harm is, the less likely it has to be. And in contrast, the less serious the harm, the more likely it has to be. In the case example statement, we had information about seriousness of the feared harm and the additional meaning that is related to parental capacity. Remember to differentiate when evidencing harm that has taken place from harm that is feared that could take place in the future. Identify the factors that may make harm severe and the factors that indicate additional meaning. Make reference to the issues of parental change and any prediction points you can confidently make. These provide the key structures to Section 7. And of course, if you are stuck, the significant harm checklist can be used to help you identify the key features. In Section 8 of the risk assessment, a summary statement is created. It brings together information from each of the sections of the risk assessment. This creates a summary of the risk assessment and can be used in other documents and processes, such as social work reports to case conference. We have used a case example to explain how the Stage 2 risk assessment is used in practice. The significance of harm can be seen in this paragraph. It is obviously a lot briefer than the statement about significance you looked at in Section 7. It summarises the key points. It reads as: I consider that this harm is significant due to the mother's unwillingness to engage with substance misuse services and maintain changes in her behaviour. Change in behaviour has been brief, and she has relapsed twice in 3 months. She does not consistently use the needle disposal units provided to her to make the home environment safer, or consistently ensures that another safe adult is available to supervise the child. Exercise 10. Significance of harm. Exercise 10 provides you with an opportunity to use Section 7 of the risk assessment. From the Downloads page on the Practice Resource module, you'll find a workbook to accompany this course. This exercise is in the workbook with instructions and the questions from Section 7 for you to complete. You can pause the video in order to fill in your workbook. And when referring to any cases in your workbook, please do this anonymously, for example, by using initials. Please consider the case example from your own practice. In your workbook, please complete Section 7.1, which focuses on identifying whether harm is severe or likely to be so in the future. This section comes from the first section of the significant harm checklist. You can pause the video in order to fill in your workbook. Please consider the case example from your own practice. In your workbook, please complete Section 7.2, which focuses on identifying additional meaning. This part of the significant harm checklist has 3 sections. These are: 1. What is judged reasonable for a parent? 2. Exploring the young person's behaviour and whether they are beyond parental control. 3. Exploring other influences or factors, such as grooming or exploitation. Fill in whichever section is relevant to your case study. The section shown on the slide comes from the second section of the significant harm checklist, and the part focused on the reasonable parent. In your workbook, you'll see all 3 parts of section 2. Read them all and fill in the questions relevant to your case example. You can pause the video in order to fill in your workbook. Please consider the case example from your own practice. In your workbook, please complete section 7.3, which brings together your overall findings into a statement. Here you will record factors, meaning, or inference to the harm that indicates that this harm is significant. This will include your judgment and supporting evidence. This is a large text section which is unstructured. However, you have already used the structures of the significant harm checklist to identify the severity of and additional meaning to the harm in the exercises that you did last. In addition, you may have evidence and analysis in relation to the capacity of the parents to meet the child's needs, and also the capacity of the parents to change to reduce significant harm in the future. There is an example of the statement in your workbook. You can read and review this. However, each case will be different, and you may have more or less information to record in this section. Please take your time completing this exercise. You can pause the video in order to fill in your workbook. In your workbook, please complete the reason for decision section. This is a different paragraph to the one you completed for section 7. This relates to section 8, which we'll look at in the next video. By referring to the case example from your own work, please develop your sentences about the significance of harm. It will be a summary of the key points from the previous exercise. It'll be a lot shorter. For example, the case summary in this slide is 69 words, compared to the 299 words that were used to present the whole evidence in section 7. I consider that this harm is significant due to the mother's unwillingness to engage with substance misuse services and maintain changes in her behaviour. Change in behaviour has been brief, and she has relapsed twice in 3 months. She does not consistently use the needle disposal unit provided to her to make the home environment safer, or consistently ensures that another safe adult is available to supervise the child. You can compare the examples in your workbook and see how the key information from section 7 is summarised in the reason for decision paragraph. Write your own version of the summary based on your answers in section 7.3. What did you find most challenging about identifying what makes harm significant? What additional guidance or explanation would assist you to complete this task in the future? What did you find interesting about this exercise? You can record your observations in your workbook. Once you have worked through video 15 of the Assessing Risk of Significant Harm course, please progress to the next part, which is video 16. Section 8 includes your decision about the likelihood of harm and the reason for your decision.